Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, a busy couple of days across the United States, a major decision from the United States Supreme Court on tariffs, some major cartel operations taking place south of the border in Mexico, plus a deadly shooting at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Melissa Gott and her team. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Well, typically we like to focus on a topic or two during the show. However, there's just so much going on, so much that did go on this weekend. We are going to be jumping kind of all over the place, so strap in for what is a busy Monday edition of the program. We'll start taking us all the way back to Friday in a major decision from the United States Supreme Court. A 6-3 split decision on Friday ruled that President Donald Trump's wide-sweeping tariffs that he has implemented going back to April of last year, known as Liberation Day across the United States, are not constitutional, claiming that the president's use of IEPA, which goes back to some legislation that was passed and put into a U.S. law back in the 70s, that does give the president the authority to implement tariffs during times of emergency or in cases where there is issues unfolding, that the president is not allowed to use those IEPA tariffs to implement these wide-ranging tariffs across the United States. This is the moment that it happened. This was the immediate reaction and conversation as it took place on Fox News just after 10 o'clock Friday morning, Friday morning here across the U.S.
We do. We've got a very fractured opinion, but initially what it says, we know it's authored, the primary opinion, by the Chief Justice, and says essentially that this IEPA, this law that grants the president emergency powers, did not, it looks like by this first blush reading by the Chief Justice here, does not give him the power to levy these tariffs that he's levied. Part of this initial opinion says the words regulate and importation. The president says that gives him the independent power to impose tariffs on imports from any country, any product, any rate, any time. These words, it says, cannot bear such weight. We know we've got a dissent by Justice Kavanaugh, by Thomas, and Alito, it looks like. And those were the three we thought during the arguments, if anyone would be persuaded to allow the president to move forward with these tariffs, they would be the ones to do it. So at first blush, like I said, there are multiple parts and concurrences to this opinion, but it looks like what the primary holding is going to be is that these tariffs cannot be used in the way that the president had tried to use them. Let me get you to the closing paragraph that we have in this initial opinion here. It says, the president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it, meaning if he wants to do it, he's got to show that Congress has allowed him to do it. But they say IEPA, this emergency powers law, contains no reference to tariffs or duties. The government points to no statute in which Congress used the word regulate to authorize taxation. And until now, no president has ever read IEPA to confer such powers. We claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs, but we claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution. Fulfilling that role, we hold that IEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. We'll keep reading. That is the first blush, authored by the Chief Justice John Roberts.
And that is the voice of Shannon Bream. She is Fox News' chief legal correspondent. She also, if you're somebody that watches the broadcast Fox, she hosts Fox News Sunday as well. Fox's kind of weekly news rundown program. That was the immediate reaction, the immediate announcement from the immediate discussion on the announcement just after 10 o'clock Friday morning. And so there's a couple of different things to kind of play out here. And this is still, I'll note, even though it was back a couple of days ago, Still a very dynamic situation. This is something that the president, yes, hosted a news conference shortly afterwards around, I think it was around 12:30 or 12:45 on Friday, discussing this. I'm not going to get into any of the clips of that because a lot of it's not necessarily super time sensitive right now. But this is going to be a continued story. This is going to continue to play out. The president has made it abundantly clear that tariffs are one of his most important things. You've heard him say plenty of times that tariffs, the T word as he refers to it sometimes, is his favorite word in the dictionary. It is something that he talked about heavily during the 2024 presidential campaign in the early days of this administration, starting back in late January, early February of 2025. He continually talked about tariffs. You had that big Liberation Day announcement in early April of last year as well. And so it is obvious to it, at least appears at face value, obvious to me that the president is not moving off of tariffs. He's just not. There's nothing that I've seen, no indication. This press conference he held Friday afternoon, he's not moving off this issue. He is now no longer going to be able to use IEEPA, however, I'll note, to continue with these tariffs. But by no stretch of the imagination do I believe that the president is going to move off of this, which is interesting because when you look at the tariff policies being implemented by the president, largely they are not popular. They're just not. People equate tariffs, and I think rightfully so, with taxation. It is a tax on the American consumer, and I'm not saying this to admonish any of the concerns that the president has, because he does have a lot of concerns, and a lot of them are very valid. He makes the point, and rightfully so, that in many cases, the United States is getting screwed internationally with trade. That you have many countries, some tend to be more hostile than others, that are treating the United States unfairly as it relates to trade. And I can't argue that fact. Nobody, in fact, can argue that situation because it's the truth. You can go and look at some of the tariffs imposed by foreign nations on the United States, and you can make the argument that those are being implemented in an unfair way. So the base of what the president is upset about and what he's ticked off about is something that I think is very valid and very relevant. And I'm not going to sit here and try and take anything away from that. The way in which the president went about implementing these tariffs was probably not necessarily the best if the plan was to keep the IEEPA tariffs in place long term. Now, there's another side of this. This administration is not stupid. The people that the president has surrounded himself with, they're not idiots. They're not morons. They very clearly understand what is going on. They very clearly know the situation that was unfolding. And I saw some rumblings late in the day on Friday that drew a pretty strong conclusion that even within the West Wing of the Oval Office, even within the highest levels of this administration, they had a pretty good idea that this decision was going to come down the way in which it did. They felt pretty confident that things were going to play out this way. And in fact, they did. But in terms of the president's success in using tariffs, he got away with it for almost a year. I mean, we're here the end of February is coming up on Saturday. I mean, so we're less than a week away from the start of March. For almost a year, he got away with these wide sweeping tariffs under IEEPA, under this emergency authority here in the United States. So if the goal was to just immediately get tariffs on board out of the gate, in some cases you could look at this and say it was a success, even though it went through the legal system, went through the judicial process, and was inevitably struck down, as I noted, in that 6-3 decision by the United States Supreme Court. Before we continue with any more of the analysis of this, and there's going to be plenty, I'm not going to go through all of it today. This is not going to be a show that is completely dedicated to the tariff thing because it's incredibly fast moving. The president is hosting the State of the Union tomorrow night, and so there's going to be a lot of discussion there. It's a very active, very fluid situation, so hitting some of the highlights and some of the more broad strokes on this without some of this in this more in-depth analysis, because I think it's rapidly going to change, One thing I do need to state, and something I need you to make sure that you are out there propagating, is that anything that you've heard from the left over the last year about how Donald Trump is destroying the Constitution, that the Supreme Court is in the pocket of this administration, that this president is an authoritarian dictator that can do whatever he wants without consequence, those people, ladies and gentlemen, are completely full of shit. Plain and simple. There's no nice way to say it. You have had many individuals on the left now yelling and screaming for a year about how this guy can do whatever the hell he wants. Nobody is ever going to jump in and tell him no. Typical fear-mongering, typical outrage from those on the political left with no basis. This worked the way that it was supposed to. We have 3 branches of government. We have separation of powers. And the system worked. Now, if you are a fan of these overarching tariffs, like the president obviously is, and he was pretty ticked off about this news on Friday, then you may not be happy with the way in which this played out. But you should be happy, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. You should be happy that the Supreme Court continues to operate as their own branch, which is, of course, the judicial branch. You have the executive, you have the legislative, and you have the judicial. Unlike what the Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden is aware of, those are the 3 branches of government. And separation of powers played out here. The president pushed his luck on this issue, made his argument, had his administration make his argument in those oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court late last year. They were unsuccessful, and the process worked. So the next time you hear some moronic liberal running around screaming about authoritarian dictatorships and how Donald Trump is torching the Constitution in front of our very eyes, use this as an example and call them out for their BS. Call them out for their outrage. Call them out for the nonsensical commentary, because that's all that this is. It's all that it is. It's never been based in reality. It's never been based in any truth. It is a good talking point to get all of these idiots on the left all riled up and all hot and bothered about how Donald Trump is destroying the country. He's doing this. Oh my God. It didn't happen. He did something. The Supreme Court said, as we interpret this law passed by Congress, which I'll note is incredibly ambiguous, which is a failure of the legislative branch. But the Supreme Court said, little too ambiguous for us. These authorities are not clearly laid out as we see that they should be for you to implement these tariffs using IEEPA to do that. And so we are telling you that that is unconstitutional, that you are not allowed to do that. And the president has said, okay. He is no longer going to use IEEPA to do this. And we'll get into what he is going to do likely moving forward. A couple of comments coming into our show this morning. The Supreme Court did not actually say Trump must shut down the tariff dashboard. Just the opposite, in fact. A dissenting opinion that the president loved. Trump read part of it to reporters. He did do that on Friday. And with that, another comment, they obviously had a plan B ready to go without skipping a beat. And that's the other point I'm going to get into. And I just kind of highlighted it. This administration knew that in all likelihood this was going to be shot down. These people are not stupid. These individuals are not roaming around like Roombas, bouncing into walls and bumping into furniture, not knowing what's going on. They had a very, in my estimation, they had a very strong opinion and thought that this was probably not going to go forward. But over the last 10 or 11 months, the president has been pretty successful with levying, or at least threatening to levy some of these tariffs under IEEPA to continue to push his agenda, to begin the process of penning some of these trade deals, to stop foreign conflicts and foreign wars, something else that the president highlighted on Friday in his early afternoon press conference. And so one of the other things to note here, and so one of the other misconstrued things about all of this, is you've got Democrats now that are and spent the weekend running around the country talking about how tariffs are dead, tariffs are over, the president is no longer allowed to implement tariffs, and that also is not true at all. Here's a quick clip from Jonathan Turley on Fox News Friday saying just that.
The administration has other tools in its toolbox. It can actually impose tariffs under other statutes. So this night is hardly over for the administration when it comes to tariffs.
And that's exactly the case. Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law scholar. He is one of the, I would argue, one of the most insightful guests and individuals that they have on Fox News with his interpretation and understanding of the law. And he says the quiet part out loud. There's still a lot of runway left for this administration. There's other tools in the toolbox, and there are. There's statutes going back to the 1930s dealing with tariffs. There's other legislation from the early 1970s that deal with tariffs as well. And in a conversation with a good friend this weekend, the discussion was, well, the president in the past may have been using kind of a spray and pray tactic with these tariffs. He's no longer allowed to do that under IEEPA. And so now he's just going to have to be a little bit more strategic with how he does it. Instead of spraying and praying, he's going to have to use more of a strategic long gun to deal with this problem. And that comment is coming in as well. The Supreme Court had to shut down IEEPA so that progressives wouldn't use it nefariously in the future, but they let the president use it for 8 months before they shot it down. And that's exactly the case. And so what we've seen from the president over the last couple of days, and he announced this on Friday, is that he is imposing a 10% global tariff moving forward, not using IEEPA, but using other statutes to impose this 10% across the board tariff for right now. And that is exactly what he is going to do. And we're going to see how this plays out. Now, let's be honest. The easiest situation for this and for the president moving forward is to go through Congress. If he is hell-bent, which I think he is, based on all of his public commentary, based on everything that we've seen from the administration thus far, he is pretty hell-bent on using tariffs. I don't necessarily agree with his use of tariffs wholeheartedly. I understand parts of it, and I agree with parts of it. I don't agree with other parts of it. But it's obvious to me that he wants to move forward with this, and the most surefire way to do this is to go through the legislative process. To have Mike Johnson and or John Thune run some legislation laying out some of these tariffs, pass it through the upper and lower chambers of Congress, and have the president sign off on it. Now, the likelihood of that is probably not very high. You've got members, Republicans in both the House and the Senate that do not agree with the president's policies and plans of using tariffs, and some of the arguments they make I actually tend to agree with. And so that avenue is probably not going to go forward. And so you're seeing the president now, which I don't believe there was a scramble in the Oval Office or in the West Wing on Friday when this news came out. They are going to try all of these other statutes, all of these other laws that are on the books right now, things that have been duly passed by Congress, duly signed into law by a president of the United States, to continue going forward with this. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The president feels strongly about his use of tariffs. He believes that we are seeing a major benefit of that. I think that is a little bit up in the air as it relates to this larger and overall discussion on free trade, on some of these trade imbalances. And I'll make the argument that you've heard a lot of individuals make, and I talked about this this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour with the CEO and president of the John Locke Foundation. If you want to bring jobs, if you want to bring manufacturing back to the United States, there's one clear way to do this. Cut out the bureaucracy, cut out the red tape, and cut out the regulation. And we're already seeing a lot of that. I have said now for quite some time, and I'm not really hearing anybody mention or talk about this, Lee Zeldin, who is a former gubernatorial candidate out of New York State, former member of Congress, ran as a governor in New York, almost won. He is leading the Environmental Protection Agency under the Trump administration, and he is doing an incredible job. He is doing an amazing job hacking and slashing all of these garbage, nonsensical regulations that make it very unaffordable to do business in the U.S. You've seen a lot of this out of the EPA. It doesn't get a lot of news coverage. It's not the big sexy topics that everybody wants to talk about, but it's very, very important things. And so for this administration, and to their credit, they've already done a lot of this. If the concern is bringing manufacturing, bringing factory jobs, bringing production back to the United States, then you've got to keep hacking and slashing at government. You've got to continue to shrink the size of the federal government to allow that to happen, to make it so that a company, a business wants to manufacture in the United States and not sit through months or years of federal regulation to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, when you boil all of these conversations down, business should be allowed to operate without burdensome government regulations. And that's across the board, whether we're talking about local governments, state governments, or federal governments. It does not matter. If you get government out of the way, business has a much, much larger incentive to do business. You're seeing that here in North Carolina. If you need an example of how this plays out in real life, how this plays out in practicality, you can see it right here in our state. The legislature over the last almost 15 years now has continued to reduce regulation, has continued to lower the corporate income tax, has continued to lower the personal income tax, and has moved big government out of the way. They have made North Carolina an incredibly affordable state to live and a state that is very lucrative for business owners. And what is the result? 3 out of the last 4 years, CNBC has ranked North Carolina the #1 state for business. That does not happen by accident. That is not something that you just roll over out of bed and you find out you're the #1 state for business. No, that is very strategic policymaking. That is very smart decisions by our North Carolina General Assembly, to the chagrin of Democrats, whether it's Roy Cooper or Josh Stein. To the chagrin of them, this General Assembly has made very smart decisions to make it and put North Carolina in the driver's seat. And we're all reaping the benefits of that. It seems like every week we're getting some new major business announcement here across the state. That's a good thing. The state of North Carolina is not levying tariffs or trade restrictions on our neighboring states to get jobs here. No, they're making it affordable. They're cutting bureaucracy and cutting red tape, and everybody is reaping the benefits of that. And so that's where I believe this administration needs to spend the vast majority of its time. Hey, come to the United States. It's affordable to do work here. We've got highly talented employees that would be great to fit your business. And we're not going to bog you down with burdensome regulation and red tape. That is the solution to bringing manufacturing, bringing production, and continuing to bring job growth back to the United States. That's the solution. And so I hope, as we look forward to the State of the Union coming up in about 36 hours, that's what we will see and hear from the president. And again, the good news is they're already doing a lot of that. Some of what was in the One Big Beautiful Bill passed in July of last year did a lot of what I'm talking about, or at least parts of that. Continued rolling back regulations, continued to make the United States, and as it relates to interactions with the federal government from the business side, better, more streamlined, and less of a huge pain in the ass for these businesses, which is a huge win for the United States. One final thing on the tariff discussion is the courts said that the president has to pay back, I think it's $150 billion worth of tariffs or something like that that's been taken in. Yet the justices, the 6 in the majority, laid out no framework for that to be the case. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was one of the 3 dissenting voices from the high court, made that point to his fellow justices, saying, hey guys, I obviously disagree with the decision that you made. I don't like this decision. I disagree with it. But if you're going to make this decision, you probably should lay out exactly how this process is going to work. Right now, there is nothing laid out. I have no clue whatsoever how the administration, I don't even think they know or have any clue how they are going to begin the process of according to the Supreme Court order, having to pay back some of these tariffs. Logistically, I have absolutely no idea how that's going to work and play out. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes of that in the months and weeks and months and potentially even years to come as it relates to the decision from the high court. We did hear again from the president a little bit on Friday. He is not moving off the tariff discussion, and I would suspect that he is going to lay out at least part of his plan moving forward in the State of the Union tomorrow night, which I hope remains focused on the economy. Talked about this last week. We are heading into a midterm election. Primary date is 8 days here in North Carolina next Wednesday, March the 3rd, and it is going to be full steam ahead to the general election in November. The president and his administration has to continue, and Republicans in large part have to continue to message the economy, message the successes, talk about these major wins that they've had, and figure out how to go forward. That is the plan. That needs to be the solution, and I hope we continue to hear that from the president Tuesday night, and he doesn't come out sounding like a whiny, petulant child bitching and complaining that the Supreme Court didn't rule in his favor. If that's the case, it is a major flop of the president. Sometimes you take losses, you move on, you retool, you regather, and you figure out how to go back out and win. And I think that is one of the things that this administration, and specifically the president himself, is capable of doing, and I hope that's what we see from the president tomorrow night. Crying over spilled milk, being all salty and pissed off about this is not a good look for the president. It's not a good look for this administration and for Republicans as a whole. And so I hope the president is able to put his own personal feelings, which he's obviously really pissed off about this, is able to put some of that stuff aside, make his points. I'm not saying ignore the issue completely. Make his points, pivot, move on, and figure out, all right, how do we continue making America great again, right? Because that's what this really rolls down to. So we'll keep a very close eye on this tariff discussion in the coming weeks and months. We'll bring you the latest as soon as we get it right here on the Nick Craig Show. We've got a lot more to get into this morning. We'll continue some other stories here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show and remind you that if legal challenges arise, put your trust in the Law Group. Since 2003, Melissa Gott and the experienced team over at the Law Group have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of North Carolina. Have you ever thought about estate planning? It's a major deal. It's something that you should absolutely take a look into, and there's nobody better to do that than the Law Group here in Wilmington. They've got your back. Their dedicated team ensures that your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. The great thing about the Law Group, they're not some big national law firm. They're not located all across the United States. Melissa Gott and her team, they live here in our community. They live in and around southeastern North Carolina. They're in our backyard, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088, or online, lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. On the other side, we will talk about a cartel war brewing in Mexico, plus a North Carolina man shot and killed at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. A very bizarre and odd story there. We'll get into those details coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Monday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Monday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Hopefully you enjoyed a pretty nice weekend. A little bit of rain here and there, but weather-wise, temperature-wise, pretty nice across southeastern North Carolina. Some frigid temperatures here this morning, just a degree or two below freezing as we're just a couple of minutes past 7:30 here on this Monday morning. Keeping you up to date with everything. It has been a busy news weekend. We just talked about the situation that unfolded with the Supreme Court on Friday. We'll keep an eye on that as it relates to tariffs. But another major story breaking yesterday evening, Mexico's most powerful drug kingpin, the head of the New Generation Cartel, was apparently killed by Mexican security forces on Sunday. That is according to Mexican defense officials. They noted that they killed the individual who goes by El Menchino, and that represents a major show of force by the country's military as President Donald Trump continues to put the pressure on Mexican authorities, the Mexican government, the Mexican military, whatever entity you want to talk about, as it relates to drug trafficking, which is a major problem that is affecting the United States. This is something that, as it relates to the border and all of the discussions under the Biden administration about these border policies, this wide open Swiss cheese looking border that the previous administration created, a lot of this surrounds the drug trade. And that these cartels, for the better part of 3 years, were just going ahead and dumping whatever they wanted into the United States with no discussions, with no with no risk, with no concern that anything was going to take place. This is something that the president ran on, and he's continued to ratchet up the pressure on Mexico, the new president down there, or whatever the hell name they go by, to make this situation right. The cartel leader was killed by Mexican authorities on Sunday, and that has caused a major problem just south of the border with a wave of violence in areas controlled by the cartel, because the vast majority of the country is essentially a narco state controlled by these cartels, with reports of cars being burning cars, blocking roads, civil unrest in the streets, all hell breaking loose as this major cartel leader was killed. The U.S. Embassy warned U.S. citizens as in parts of some states in Mexico to shelter in place because of security operations and road blockades and other issues taking place, encouraging those individuals to stay where they are. Do not try and travel. Do not try and leave right now. So a major military operation taking place. What this is going to mean going forward is not immediately clear right now, but American tourists and travelers, I would imagine others, nationals as well, from other nations also being told the same things. Airlines canceling flights, authorities issuing shelter-in-place orders as cars are being set ablaze and cartel members are blocking roads, patrolling streets, ransacking and looting stores. It is all hell is breaking loose right now in portions of Mexico as this is taking place. This is going to be interesting to see. We've not seen an immediate reaction from the U.S. president as of yet as it relates to this major military operation in killing one of the most prominent drug kingpins in Mexico. And we'll see if this is something that the Mexican government continues to crack down on, or do they just kill the head of it? The next guy kind of steps up and it is business as usual. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds and plays out in the coming days. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Nick Craig Show. In some other news this morning as well, a 21-year-old from Moore County, North Carolina, not too far north of the Charlotte area, by the name of Austin Tucker Martin, was shot and killed by Secret Service and local police at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. This is a very, very bizarre story. The incident apparently occurred around 1:30 a.m. Sunday morning, so Saturday night into Sunday morning, when this 21-year-old made a, quote, unauthorized entry through the north gate of the Mar-a-Lago resort as another vehicle was exiting. The man, identified as 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin of North Carolina, was shot and killed. The suspect was observed carrying what appeared to be a shotgun and a gasoline can. Agents and a deputy from the Secret Service agents and a deputy from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office confronted him, and according to a press release from the Secret Service, they wrote, they confronted a white male that was carrying a gas can and a shotgun. He was ordered to drop the two pieces of equipment that he had with him, at which point he put down the gas can, raised the shotgun into a shooting position, and at that point in time, the deputy and two Secret Service agents fired their weapons and neutralized that threat, shooting and killing him. Secret Service noted that the suspect did not exchange any words with law enforcement. He did not yell back at them. He didn't say anything. He was instructed to drop the items, drop the gas can, presumably put the shotgun, bringing it to his shoulder into a shooting position. And as you would expect and as you would hope would take place if you are going to aim a firearm at any sort of law enforcement, whether we're talking about Secret Service, sheriffs, state highway patrol, local police, you are going to be shot and killed. And I would argue you should be shot and killed if you're going to raise a firearm or put it into a shooting position at law enforcement. The 21-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. Neither the sheriff nor the Secret Service agents were injured. And it is important to note, of course, that the president was not at Mar-a-Lago during the time he was in Washington, D.C. at the White House this weekend. So not immediately clear what exactly the plan was for this 21-year-old from North Carolina, which is prompting a lot of very interesting questions. This guy, Tucker Martin, had no social media presence that has been found. No Facebook, no X, no Instagram, no TikTok, no social media presence whatsoever. He was apparently reported missing from members of his family. They called the Carthage police, that's the town in which he was from, Carthage, North Carolina, not far, just outside of Pinehurst, called the police, reported him as missing. They put out an APD, missing on him. Then he's shot and killed by Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department deputies and Secret Service members on very early Sunday morning, 1:30 in the morning. The whole thing makes no sense. The whole thing is incredibly odd, and it's something that there are, at this point for me, there are more questions than answers. There is a lot more that we don't have of the story. And, this is now the second individual that has tried that has either attempted to try and hurt the president or was seemingly looking to do so. I can't think of any other reason why you'd bring a gasoline can and a loaded shotgun to the president's Florida residence if you aren't trying to kill him. I think that's a fair assumption to make. That has had no social media presence, which is odd. And I'm not trying to go too tinfoil hat on you this morning, but I find that almost impossible to believe. Question coming in on our chat: who reported him missing? Apparently his aunt, a family member, reported him missing. I guess that happened sometime late in the day on Saturday before he drove down to Mar-a-Lago, which I don't exactly know what the time on that is. If we pull up a map and do from Pinehurst, North Carolina to I guess we'll do Palm Beach, Florida. That is it's about a 10-hour drive, so it's a pretty lengthy travel. It's almost 700 miles via car, so presumably traveling throughout the day on Saturday, getting there late Saturday night, early Sunday morning before entering through one of those north gates on the West Palm Beach Mar-a-Lago property that the president does own, operate in, and in large part live in outside of him being in the Oval Office. The whole situation, again, is just very bizarre, very weird. WRAL News spoke to friends and relatives of him who said, I have no idea what was going on here. One individual said, we grew up together, his cousin, 19 years old, and I wouldn't believe he would do something like this. It's completely mind-blowing. His cousin said he wouldn't even hurt an ant. He doesn't even know how to use a gun. We are all big Trump supporters, all of us, everyone. Noted that his cousin was, quote, really quiet and never really talked about anything. And so there's a comment coming in about, mental illness, obviously, if you are in the position where you think it is a smart, a good, a great idea to attempt to bring a loaded firearm and a gasoline can to the president's Florida property, yes, I think it is a fair assessment to draw and a fair point to make that that you are suffering from some severe mental issues. The whole situation is very, very bizarre. No idea what the hell went on here, but he was ordered to stop, decided to try and holster or try and put his firearm in some sort of shooting position, and he was shot and killed by the individuals from Secret Service and from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. So bizarre situation. No idea exactly what went on there. We'll presumably learn some more in the coming days, but a weird situation now. And by the way, this is the second time that a guy from North Carolina has gone to Mar-a-Lago to try and kill the president. You'll remember back almost 2 years, a little over a year and a half ago, an individual attempted to do that exact same thing and was not shot and killed, but was arrested by Secret Service for sitting in some sort of a tree perch stand looking over the golf course there in West Palm Beach that the president frequents. So something odd going on, no question about it. We'll keep you up to date with the details here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, rounding out our conversation this morning, New York City looking and staring down the barrel of a major winter weather event right now. Portions of the city looking at getting a feet, and yes, I said feet of snow. This is a major blizzard that is taking place right now. Some of the snowfall totals, looking at the information here from Fox Weather, who is reporting some of these totals. You are looking at, again, feet of snow in areas across the Northeast. This is what Fox Weather has got out. You can see portions of New York City in towards Boston, 18 to 24 inches of snow. Some areas maybe even seeing more than that throughout the day on Monday. And while the snow is interesting and whatnot, here's an interesting story for you. In New York City, you've of course got a literal self-described socialist as the mayor, Zohran Mamdani. We've talked a lot about him. And he, in an attempt to try and help the city deal with one of the largest winter storms to affect the area in decades, has asked people that live in New York City to come shovel snow. They will be paid, I believe it's close to $20 an hour to shovel snow through the New York City Department of Sanitation. And for individuals that maybe not in work, students, things of that nature, hey, you make a couple of bucks and shovel some snow. Here's the issue. According to state officials, according to those that are within the New York City Department of Sanitation, shovelers must be 18 years or older and able to perform heavy physical labor. They must also be eligible to work in the United States, and they must also bring 2 small 1x5-inch square photos, 2 original forms of IDs and copies, along with a social security card for registration. So let me make sure I understand this. You are paying people $20 an hour plus to shovel snow, and you're asking them to bring photos of themselves, original forms of ID, driver's licenses, passport, things of that nature, and a social security card. All of this to shovel snow. All of this to literally walk around New York City with a shovel and move stuff falling from the sky from one location to the other. For that, you need to go through all of these hoops to verify your identity through the New York Department of Sanitation. Why is this ridiculous? Well, of course, because it is the Democrat Party, people like Zohran Mamdani, that continue to push the narrative, continue to push the meme that voter ID is too restrictive. that how dare you require somebody to verify who they are before they cast a ballot. But if you just want to simply shovel snow for the city of New York, for their Department of Sanitation, you practically have to bring your firstborn child to city officials to verify that you are capable of doing the work. Josh Goodman, who is the Department of Sanitation Deputy Commissioner for Public Affairs, said that this program is a long-standing initiative that gives New Yorkers the opportunity to earn money clearing critical infrastructure when a major storm hits the city, noting that ensuring compliance with employment law isn't red tape for its own sake. It's what allows the program to operate reasonably and sustainably, helping keep our city running through some of the toughest winter days. Now, it's important to note that in New York State, some of the Board of Elections offices do not require most registered voters to bring IDs. So you don't need an ID to vote, but you need an ID to shovel snow. Just let that sink in for a second. You don't need an ID to vote. Voting for members of Congress, voting for the president, voting for members of the New York legislature, no ID needed. But if you want to shovel some snow for the good city of New York, then you need to bring your Social Security card and at least 2 forms of photo ID. Just let that sink in next time that you hear Zohran Mamdani or any other moronic leftist arguing and complaining about voter ID. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it's why you continue to see that the issue of voter ID remains an 80-20 issue across the country. 80% of people do not believe that it is too burdensome. 80% of people do not believe that you have to, that you are having to jump through way too many hoops to simply show your photo ID to state or election officials to cast a ballot. It is another example of typical Democrat hypocrisy. I don't know why they need all of this identification to pay people to shovel snow if all you need to show up to vote is just say your name and that is all you need. It's, of course, an incredibly ridiculous situation that we continue to watch playing out in these major Democrat cities. So another major win for Zohran Mamdani. We'll see if the progressives try and eat him alive for requiring such burdensome, racist, bigoted, and misogynistic policies for those shoveling snow in New York City as they dig out from, in some cases, nearly 2 feet of snow across the New York and Boston metropolitan area. We'll see if any reaction comes in from that. Well, that's going to do it for a Monday edition of the show. As I mentioned, kind of all over the place, a very busy couple of days. We are, of course, continuing to monitor the ongoing continued escalation with Iran, more U.S. assets being placed over the weekend, the president giving a 10 to 12 day essentially wait and watch period for Iranian officials and the supreme leader. We'll wait and see if any of that additional military action comes up in the next couple of days, and we'll see pretty much what the president has to say as it relates to that during the State of the Union. And then finally, a major win for the U.S. men's hockey team, going tit for tat with the Canadian team yesterday in the Winter Olympic Games, wrapping up the 2026 Winter Olympics. The U.S. winning in an overtime goal, beating Canada 2-1 as a 3-on-3 situation. Overtime took place. The U.S. goal shot by Jack Hughes, who plays for the New Jersey Devils, giving the U.S. men gold in the Olympics for ice hockey for the first time since 1980. You've got to go all the way back to the Miracle on Ice situation in Lake Placid in 1980 when the United States upset the Soviets. Now, I'll note that was not the gold medal game. It was a round-robin tournament, back in the 1980s, when was the last time that the U.S. men won gold. This is only the third gold medal for U.S. men's hockey in the history of the Olympics. So shout out to them. The president, I just got an alert on my phone from Fox News. It says, breaking news, President Trump invites the U.S. men's hockey team to the State of the Union after Olympic triumph. We'll see if they were originally planning to fly back into New York City, but obviously 2 feet of snow doesn't allow that, so they're flying through Miami. Not immediately clear if they'll make it to the State of the Union, but you can guarantee that they will be making their way to the White House in the coming weeks with the president. Phenomenal to hear all of the men on the Olympic team talking about how proud they are to be Americans, how big this is for them to show American hockey on this international stage, to beat our arch nemesis in Canada, our 51st state to the north. A major win, huge patriotic boost for the United States. Bravo to the men's hockey team, and well, to hell with Canada and all of their stupid nonsense. Justin Trudeau and all the Canucks to our north for poking at the United States before. And Trudeau put out some stupid post about how you can't take our country, you also can't beat us in hockey. Well, we beat you in hockey, jackass. So we'll see. We'll see what's next as it relates to the U.S.'s plan and Trump's plan with our friendly neighbors to the north in Canada. Shout out, huge props to the U.S. men's hockey team and their major Olympic gold medal victory over Canada yesterday in Italy. Well, that's going to do it for a Monday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Don't forget that you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday morning, 7 o'clock, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and is available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. Have a great Monday. We're back with you tomorrow right here on The Nick Craig Show.